for more on the school debate and everything that's coming with this really unbelievable issue that's got millions of school kids and parents up in arms. Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov and King's College senior fellow and constitutional attorney Mark Smith join us. Mark, Jessica, thanks for taking time. I just want to show you, in case you missed it, this is the cover of the New York Post on Friday. We can put it up on your screen. You can see it there. It says, Joe gets an F. And you heard there in Lucas Tomlinson's report at the White House, Jen Psaki being asked about why the White House won't use its bully pulpit. Jessica, I want to start with you. Why won't the administration try and alleviate this situation and get these schools reopened?
Well, I think that they are trying to alleviate the situation. President Biden did make it a central plank of his campaign that kids would be going back to schools, and they wanted to make sure that we do that in the safest way possible. But I've got to say, and though I don't usually take my political cues from the cover of the New York Post, that I'm as frustrated as Lori Lightfoot is, though actually she's probably a little more frustrated since she's actually negotiating with the teachers' unions. But I've been absolutely heartbroken over the stories like the one in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about the increases in suicides and mental health episodes of school-age children in Clark County in Nevada. This is going on everywhere. There was another piece about the strain on working mothers specifically. Nearly all of the job losses last month were women, especially minority women, and most with people who have children and are now teachers instead of doing their jobs over Zoom. They absolutely have to get to the classroom, and if the CDC director and Dr. Fauci has been saying this for a while, can go back to school, vaccinated or not, that needs to be our nation's top priority at this point.
Mark, as Jessica pointed out, reopening these schools has been a centerpiece of President Biden's promises in the first 100 days. So when you see covers, like I showed, the New York Post and others criticizing the administration for not doing enough, is that unfair?
Well, look, the reality is politics, right? I mean, Joe Biden, one of the largest, contributors to the Democratic Party and to the Biden campaign was, of course, the public teachers unions. So you have the public teachers unions who want to basically continue with virtual learning against really the parents. So Joe Biden is to some degree between a rock and a hard place here politically because he doesn't want to, irritate a major part of his core constituency. On the other hand, you have prominent Democrats. You have Michael Bloomberg and Lori Lightfoot come out saying we really need to reopen these schools because, yes, COVID is a risk to Americans and to everyone, but there are trade-offs, and the health and public health and other considerations and potential harm to the students and to their learning and to their futures and to their mental health and the like is something that has to be considered. So I think that, I think at some point Joe Biden has to use his bully pulpit. The question is, how will he use it? Will he use it to basically back the teacher unions, or will he use it to go against a core constituency and in this case side with the parents?
Jessica, if the president won't use the bully pulpit, another way to cajole these teachers unions is in the COVID relief bill. Democrats have full run of it. They're going to go it alone approach. Should they put a stipulation in receiving the $170 billion for K through 12 schools? In receiving that money, should they be forced to reopen first?
I think that everything has to be on the table at this point. There was a report last week coming out that Fairfax County was going to go back to school, but without teachers, that there would be essentially hall monitors supervising children in these classrooms. Teachers are essential workers as far as I'm concerned. So we should take every precaution to make sure that they are safe in the classroom, that everyone has the PPE, that there is plexiglass everywhere. If they want shields on top of masks and N95s, absolutely. And we can build that into the COVID relief bill. But I think that teachers who are able, and I know that some will have pre-existing conditions or comorbidity concerns that make it implausible for them to go back, but the vast majority should be able to get back into that classroom, and I think we should use every tool in our toolkit to make sure that happens as quickly as possible.
We'll see what happens. Mark, let me change gears a little bit here because we have an impeachment trial starting in the Senate on Tuesday. What do you predict we will see?
Well, I think again, what we're really going to see here is a political debate. I think at the end of the day, the legal case for impeaching a president that is no longer in office is relatively weak. And I think the best evidence that it's a relatively weak legal position is that the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts, is not even going to bother showing up to this impeachment trial. I think that sends a pretty big message about how he views this. Beyond this, I think you will see a dueling of political narratives. You will see the Democrats trying to score political points, not just against Donald Trump, but most importantly, going forward, against Donald Trump's supporters, as well as to Republican politicians. On the other hand, I think you'll see the Trump lawyers probably try to highlight the hypocrisy here of where you looked at the entire summer of 2020, where Democrats were basically standing by and watching some of these riots in places like Portland and Minneapolis, and they weren't really maybe standing up as firmly as they should have. And I think you'll see that sort of evidence being brought forth to say, geez, if you're going to impeach Donald Trump over his references to peaceful protests at the Capitol, then what are you going to do about all these other politicians that in theory could also be impeached from their positions in federal office? So I think you'll really see dueling political narratives going on. At the end of the day, I think it's extremely unlikely that Donald Trump gets convicted of anything in the Senate. I think that's just the political reality of it.
Well, and the political reality is that the votes doesn't look like will be there, Jessica, to convict Donald Trump. So should they even go forward with this? Is it a distraction to the Biden administration getting their agenda moving forward?
No, it's absolutely not a distraction to the Biden administration. And Joe Biden made a few comments last week that were his most emphatic about why it needs to go forward in a meeting in the Oval Office. He said that. This is not just about scoring political points, though we will see dueling narratives. My read on those narratives is a little different than Mark's. This is about principle. It's about constitutional duty and the fact that the President of the United States of America incited a riot at the Capitol. We lost 5 lives because of it, and we could have lost a lot more. And the Democrats will absolutely talk about his role in spreading what we called the big lie, that this election was stolen. And if reports are true from the last couple of weeks that these are the only lawyers that would take the case, the people who were going to take the case had to drop out because the president wanted them to get up there and wanted them to lie about what happened on November 3rd and in the ensuing days about election fraud that did not occur on a widespread level. And so the president deserves to have this happen. And as far as the constitutional grounds, he was impeached while he was in office. Mitch McConnell made it impossible for us to finish this trial before Donald Trump left office. So it has nothing to do with what the Constitution says. It has to do with the politics of Mitch McConnell and nothing else. So I am excited to see what happens in the case that's brought forward, but it's an important moment for the American people who believe he played a central role in this.
And Jessica and Mark, I just want to quickly get in before we run out of time. One more subject that obviously the impeachment trial will be happening, but also what we're seeing now at the border is an influx of migrants coming again, 253 in 1 hour in the Rio Grande Valley yesterday, more than 1,000 a day. How big of a problem do you think the immigration issue will be now as a result of all of the executive actions and orders the administration's already taking? Mark?
Well, I think the reality is the Joe Biden immigration policy is just going to be a return to the Barack Obama immigration policy, where you have no border enforcement or very lax border enforcement. So remember, at the end of the day, we are a nation of laws. Laws must be followed by all who live here or who want to come here. So when the first thing that a person does at the southern border is basically break into the country and get caught, the idea of, let's say, catch and releasing them into the American public and just to show up 6 months later for some, potential court hearing, I'm not sure is really a robust border policy, to say the least. But really what we're really seeing here is in some ways a de facto encouragement of people to come to the border and come to the United States illegally at the southern border. And I think the reality is we're going to see more of this going forward, because the border policing is really going to be laxer than it was during the Trump administration. And I think that's the reality on the ground.
Jessica, I'll just give you the last word.
Thanks so much. I do think that there's going to be an influx of migrants coming in now that Joe Biden is in office. He is certainly more open to people seeking asylum here, and I think for good up for their court hearing. That is a central argument that Republicans use against us letting people into this country through a catch and release program. People want to be here legally if they can, and they are fleeing countries where they are being attacked by their own governments, where they live in fear for their own lives, and a lot of them, yes, seeking economic refuge here, but DH Secretary Mayorkas has a plan for this, and while I know the numbers will go up, I'm sure that we'll be able to keep it under control. And Obama was referred to as the deporter-in-chief, if you recall, by a lot of people. So we'll see how Biden does on that front.
All right, immigration, impeachment, and school reopenings. We covered a lot of ground. Jessica Tarlov and Mark Smith, thank you for taking time. Have a great Saturday.